Any word from Yoshua? He's back? Not yet.
He's back. I mean, in physical body, yes, he's back.
He's in body.
Yeah.
Listen,
You want me to go shake the
it's
trees?
already half the battle right there.
Yeah. You want me to go shake the trees?
And Ruby? Ruby's around?
He is doing whatever Ruby does. Yeah, he's right.
Okay. Ready to roll?
Alright, we're going live on Facebook. Here's the button. We're gonna have to rename it after it's up
All
on
right.
Facebook.
So, we're beginning. Start with a little review.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Again, this is a mimer that was said by the Frierdiker Rebbe. Sorry, it was a sikha said by the Frierdiker Rebbe on the back of the bus, right? On the back of the train, where he was being dragged to Kostroma for exile and potentially worse. And he was speaking about the intense nature of the mission and the willingness to die for it, right in the face of the enemy. And in the midst of this, he says these words: "Yehi Hashem Elokeinu imanu kasher haya im avosenu al yazvinu v'al yitshenu." He quotes this pasuk: "Hashem should be with us like He was with our fathers and not abandon us." Right. And so he mentions there, there's a mimer based on that sikha. He mentions there that the word Yehi Hashem Elokeinu has two meanings. Let's do a little review, catch up to where we are right now. It has two meanings. What are the two meanings? One is a request. Let it be that Hashem should be with us like He was with our fathers. Another one is like a statement of fact or even a promise. Yehi Hashem, it will be that Hashem will be with us like He was with our fathers. Which these two things can both be read out of the same verse, but the problem is they're sort of contradictory in their meaning. Either you're asking or you're telling as a statement of a fact and a promise. So the Rebbe goes on to explain, so that's its own question. The Rebbe goes on to explain that we're asking this even though our fathers had Mesiras Nefesh Bepoel Mamish, our forefathers, the great masters of time, whereas we are asking, so to speak, without any schus, without any merit. And he brings a mashal, if you recall, from Shlomo HaMelech, who brought a mashal in Midrash of Tehillim, where he explains that if a king hires workers and they do a nice job and then he pays them, there's not really praise in the king for this. But if he hires lazy or bad workers and they don't do the job and he pays them anyway, this is the praise of the king. Or in other words, that he has so much rachmanis, he's going to do it even though they don't deserve it. And so this is kind of the request. Let Hashem be with us like He was with our fathers, even though we do not deserve it. But Hashem could be praised for giving us something we don't deserve, right? Then the question which is sort of driving this is, what are you talking about? You're praising the fathers because they had Mesiras Nefesh B'Poel Mamish. And I don't recall, you just spent like about 3 weeks in literally a cell covered with mud and rats, and they didn't feed you, and there was no light, and they beat you, threw you down the stairs, paralyzed you. You're now standing on the back of this train claiming that we will have victory while they're schlepping you into exile, and you're not having Mesiras Nefesh? Only our forefathers had Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice. So he says, now we said maybe we could explain this by saying, like Nachum Meir said yesterday, well, he was talking about basically the rest of the generation, right? He wasn't really talking about himself, but we said no, because the language that he used, Mir Zayin Zach Nid Glech to Avosenu, he says we are not compared to our forefathers, and he includes himself in it. And we said for certain reasons, it's not considered false humility, he means it. Fine. That was the question, chapter 1. We then went on to explain that the pasuk itself requires explanation, because when we say Hi Hashem Elokeinu, we're already saying may it be that God is our God, basically, because Elokeinu means our God, and we know in Chassidus and in other Perushim it means our strength and our life force. So by the time we finish saying Yehi Hashem Elokeinu, we're already basically saying Hashem should be our life force and our strength. What's the connection of saying Imanu, with us? It's kind of redundant, right? With our fathers, right? He's already with us by saying Hashem Elokeinu. So we explained that really what we're saying is that the ikar here, but when you ever have the word im, just doing a review, right? This should all be very familiar to us. I'd like to catch ourselves up before we jump and launch into new things. The concept of linguistically, when you use the word im, and we used a nice example yesterday, even though he used a little bit more lumdish one inside, but I like yours, right? You're going to have ketchup with your fries, right? That the thing you say first is what we call the tuffle, right? Which means the secondary thing. and the thing you say second is the main thing, right? It works like that in halacha, it works like that in pesukim, and it works like that in most languages, right? The idea being Hashem Elokeinu should be with us. What's the main thing? What's the phrase? Us. And we're saying Hashem Elokeinu is like the ketchup. It's a secondary thing. How can that be? Right? I'm sorry, I'm stealing your lines there. Listen, you don't know ketchup.
Hashem with the ketchup.
Lahavdil. Okay, so the point is that how can we proclaim that Hashem, so to speak, is secondary in any form whatsoever to us? What does it mean? And we start to explain that when it comes to a particular characteristic called fear, it is on this that we say Hashem has a treasure house, right? Otzar shel yirat shamayim. We don't really say Hashem has other things in his treasure house. We usually mention the idea of Hashem's treasure house being filled with fear of God. Why is this? We said because fear of God is the one thing that Hashem, so to speak, requires from us, right? Hakol b'idei shamayim chutz miyirat shamayim. Everything's in the hands of God. What you're going to wear today, your entire life is spelled out for you, right? There's a certain measure of Hashem just creating the world before you, except one thing that you really have free choice in, which is your fear of God. Whether to fear Him, whether to accept Him upon yourself and take Him as your God. So therefore, just like a treasure house, the king has stuff in his treasure house which is specifically not his. Whatever he has is not called his, what he's gathered from the treasures. So he gathers the treasures from others, and that's what he puts in his treasure house. So too, in Hashem's treasure house is the fear of God that he gathered from us, and this is the notion that, so to speak, we are the primary player in this situation, right? First thing has to be is that we fear God, and what is the Hashem Elokeinu, which is supposed to be the secondary thing, is that is like an aid for us to fearing God. In other words, we're not afraid to say that there's assistance in us to come to the point of fearing God, but the main thing that's going to be required for Avodas Hashem to take place is not that it's something should happen to you as a revelation from above, because although that might actually get you to serve Hashem, it's not called true service to Hashem. The true service to Hashem is accepting something inwardly on yourself, and if it's placed upon you outwardly, Hashem doesn't really have the pleasure that He's looking for in having you serve Him, because you're not serving Him because of you. You're serving Him because of Him. And therefore, it doesn't work. There's one thing that Hashem can't give you, which is fear of God. Otherwise, service of Hashem and all your Torah mitzvahs is basically unfounded, ungrounded. You got it? Yeah, you have a question?
About fear, if we're saying everything in your life is who you're going to marry, whatever, is determined except for fear of God, so doesn't your fear of God affect those outcomes? Like, it's not like, or does it not? Everything in your life still, you're going to marry the same person, everything's going to happen the same for you, just it's going to be a lot harder for you or something, I don't know.
Well, maybe Hashem will create the world around you differently based on your fear of God. In other words, He'll give.
Aren't you, by not fearing God, affecting these things?
You're affecting, but you're not. It's not really in your hands, I guess. You know what's it going to be? He's setting up the scenarios for you.
You're choosing to re-roll the dice, and Hashem's okay. You're going to get it this way.
Yeah, if it was dice and it was random, but basically based on your choice is going to create a different reality for you, right? Fine. So then we start to explain. Everyone with me so far? Okay. I think we're now turning to the page Yud. And I don't think we really started this chapter. Okay, let's start with Os Gimel then. That was a nice review. Okay. Now, let's continue. Os Gimel. What's the reason that fear primarily comes from the man's own service? Yesh lomar, ki yira hi bittul. What is fear? It's really called bittul. It's an element of bittul. What is bittul? Self-nullification, removing yourself from the equation, taking yourself out of the way. In other words, so when you're loving someone, loving God even, and it's a powerful, divine, even commanded experience, there's a little bit of a glitch. It doesn't remove you and your experience of sort of self from the picture. And on the contrary, yesh misha ohev. We always say there's always somebody there doing the loving. The idea is that, albeit you're loving good things and divine things as opposed to bad things, but you can't remove yourself and your own feeling of independence from the situation. On the contrary, that's the one who's experiencing the love. Bittul of fear, there's this unique quality that we have where we could actually take ourselves out of the equation. right? It's not about you. It's not about your feeling the love. It's about sort of your removal of yourself, and this is what we call bittul. So this is why the main concept of divine service, of man's service, right, is fear, because fear is bittul. What Hashem really wants is a dira b'tachtonim. He wants a dwelling place in the lowest worlds. That's what we said. There's many reasons given why Hashem created the world. Primarily, Chassidus brings down this idea. He wants a dwelling place. He wants to be here. And what's the point? I and you cannot dwell in the same place at the same time, says Hashem. If you want to be there, you're there. If you want me to be there, if you want to allow for a dwelling place for me in the lowest world, you have to remove yourself, take yourself out of the equation in some way. This is called bittul. Ubifrat yiras hamelech, particularly when it comes to the fear at the level of fearing the king, which is som tasim alecha melech, that there's a commandment, which we just quoted from the Torah, you shall surely place upon yourself a king. Shite emaso elecha, that his fear shall be upon you. In other words, you have to get yourself to a situation where you accept something upon you which has ultimate control and power over you. This type of bittul, or this type of fear, is associated with the notion that you are a slave, right? So, in other words, a slave is that there's a complete master over you. The teva eved hu she'emasu pachara adun alav. And why are we using specifically the fear of a king? Because when you have a king, it makes you a servant. And the idea of a servant is that's when you have true and ultimate fear of this master, because your entire life is in his hands, right? You can fear other entities, you can fear a rabbi, but you still have like sort of a skin in the game. You exist, you matter. When you're the eved of somebody, your mamash, they own you, right? You have total fear. They control every single decision in your life. A king, even a Jewish king, seemingly even on a whim, he could just kill you if he wants to, right? It's not like a just king, but he can do that, right? Because he just owns you and everything inside of the whole situation, right? If he feels that you've have sullied the kingdom in some way with your existence, you disappear, right? And that's a serious fear that you should. And again, you take this upon yourself to be his servant. Shabittul de eved hu bittul b'tachlis. A servant's bittul, self-nullification, is complete. And if it's going to be truly complete, as we said before, it must be voluntary. Even if he's a dictator, you can fear him because he's going to shoot you in a sense from outside, but you're not going to have an inner subservience to him. You're going to be actually a rebel against him. You hate the dictator. You're afraid of him from external things he could do to you. But you don't have like an inner subjugation where he is your master and you're his slave and you've accepted upon yourself. On the contrary, you're actually a rebel against the king at every minute. To have a real king or a dictator, to have a real king, it's som tasim alecha melech. You must place this upon yourself. You accept and internalize this mastery over you. That's a serious bittul. Because anything that's going to happen to a person by a revelation of light from above, and this revelation of light could be negative as well, right? It could be that he scares you into submission. But anything that's sort of coming from above to below in your direction, he kamo davar nosaf alav. This is a commonly used phrase in Chassidus. It's like an add-on to you. It's not really of you and of your essence. It's like stuck onto you. And it's additional to your true existence. So any fear that was going to come from a revelation from above, you may in fact be fear, but only your chitzonius, only your external reality will be in submission, not the inner you. And therefore, the change that will take place in you from having a dictator is only a change in your, what he calls tzior here, which is basically, it means like your form. But what he's really trying to say, I believe, is your sort of external behavior. In other words, you might in fact do every single thing externally that the dictator wants, and you might even speak the right language, right? But in reality, it's only changing your form. It's not changing you. You haven't given yourself over to this. And therefore, it's not a real bittul. You're still there. On the contrary, the more he pressures you, the more you're there. You're basically just waiting to rebel. That's not called a real bittul. Right, where he is residing in your place and taking up your experience. No, you haven't let him in.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
What exactly is gilui or milamala? Not everybody achieve it.
No, so gilui or milamayla, as I was saying, let me give you a. I'm actually afraid to give you that example because it's going to come up later and bite me. But Gilui Or Milamayla simply means something that's happening from outside of you. That's what we mean by it here. So Gilui Or sounds very romantic and holy, that you could have a revelation of light from above. If you translate it simply, it does not really like make exact sense what we mean over here, that that's supposed to inspire fear. Although, if Hashem comes from heaven and starts thundering and screaming and making excitement, that's called a Gilui Or Milamayla. It's a revelation of light from above. That could completely put you into submission and fear, right?
I think about most of people in Israel, most of the Jewish people,
Right.
believe in God. They will tell you, of course I believe, but they don't do anything like praying or studying Torah. So
You're going to change
not
all
all
that.
of them got Gilui Or Milemala.
What's
What
that?
are you saying?
No,
Say, I missed the last line. I was making jokes. Say it again.
I'm saying most of the Jewish people in Israel.
No, that I heard. And then what did you say at the end?
They don't get
Most of them did not get Gilui or Milamana.
They don't get Gilui Or Milamayla?
They didn't see miracles in their life.
And that's why.
I don't know. Were you here a few weeks ago? They said like 300 like huge missiles from Iran and like not only like one like Bedouin kid got hurt a little bit. I think that's a Gilui Or Milamayla, right? That's the point. For sure, there's Gilui Or Milamayla, right? There's a constant state of and again, it's not so much about seeing miracles. It's the idea that something could scare you, and you could be put into a state of submission from something that happens from above. It doesn't have to be that it's so miraculous, but the point is, Gilui Or Milamayla, it won't actually make you a servant of God. You can experience miracles and still not do Torah mitzvahs, is what we're saying here, because you have to accept it within in order to actually have a true submission to the king. You can be in a state of total rebellion, and even if the laws of the country will sort of make you do certain things. I can't drive on Shabbos because I'm not allowed in the city. But it's not something that you've accepted this, right? It's a Gilui Or Milamayla. The laws of the country could be a Gilui Or Milamayla, right? It's just something which is happening to you, which is not coming from within. That's basically simply what we mean by those words in this point. I'll use the analogy just because it's a good one, but it is going to bite me later. But the idea is, at Har Sinai, right? Hashem held a mountain over our heads. And he said, you will keep this Torah or I'm going to kill you, right? That's called a Gilui Or Milamayla. Why do we call that Gilui Or, right? Is that a revelation from God? Yeah, even though it's a revelation of fear. Okay, so that's the idea. And by the way, in a certain sense, it didn't really work, right? In other words, shortly after this, we made a golden calf. The whole idea of the Torah is that we're looking for ultimate submission inwardly to the Torah, and because that's not going to really work. It's going to bite me later. We'll see. But okay, going on. We are inside of the first paragraph from the top there, 4 lines down. So all this changes when you have this revelation from outside of you, is the change in your tzior, in other words, in your external behavior, form, it's not going to change you inwardly. If you really want to be submissive to Hashem, in other words, get out of the way, remove the I and the ego, and allow Him to be where you are, because you want to make Adira B'Tachtonim. If you want to achieve this, right? It's called the bittul of the Eved, where you're fully given over to Him. He owns you, right? You release control of your own identity to God. Shachiluk, right? Then you're going to need to receive it upon yourself. And he says in brackets before we end the sentence, Shachiluk bein ben chorin le'eved hu be'etzem mitziyuso. The difference between a free man and a servant, it's kind of funny that we're saying here the servant is the ideal we're shooting for, but we're going to be servants of God, right? So the difference between a free man and a servant is not just like a small, slight difference, right? It's an essential difference in their very being. I'm reminded of a concept, right? In many places in halacha, the different inyanim, it says basically, a child when he grows up, or a slave who becomes free, or a ger sheniz gayer, right? Or a convert that converts. So we say, why doesn't it say a goy that converts, right? It doesn't say a goy that becomes the sheniz gayer that becomes converted. It says a ger sheniz gayer, which goes to show you that he was already a ger that became converted. because there really isn't such a change in the very essence of this person. It's just like he has to kind of take off a certain level of garb that for some reason this Jew was born into. But he's a Jew from the day he's born. What's the proof? He's called a ger sheniz gayer. He's called a convert that converts. Whereas when it comes to a eved shenishtacher, a slave that becomes free, it's a slave who now becomes free. He is not the same entity that he was before as he is now. There's an essential difference in his being. When a person is a slave, he doesn't own himself. He's a piece of property of somebody else, right? And so therefore, we're trying to say, when a person has this bittul, you're not just sort of a little bit less you, right? You submit yourself entirely to the point you become a different entity. You're no longer the same being. So there's an essential difference in your person, and this can only happen to you. Again, this is something we want, right? Because the person that's owning you is God, and the person that therefore the property of God, which means you are a divine entity. You're no longer a separate being. This can only happen with your participation. You have to inwardly take this on. Som tasim alecha melech, or it won't happen. This is what's required. And therefore, we're getting back to the point that you are the main subject of the statement, Yehi Hashem Elokeinu imanu. Right? We're getting back to this idea. It's all about you. You're the Iker. Hashem cannot make you bittul. Because if he makes you bittul, it's not the bittul he wants. He can make you bittul, but he can't make you into a servant. Right? Okay, so moving on. I think I skipped the last line. So through this, bittul the Evid, hu aidesha adam asum akabel lav lios avdushma. It's only if you take it on yourself to be the servant of the king. V'yesh loma. And we can now say, Sha'al derek zehu ben mesiris nefesh. We're talking about slavery, now we're going to talk about self-sacrifice. The cave and mesiris nefesh hu bittul betachli, since mesiris nefesh is the ultimate bittul really that one can achieve, because you're willing to go to such an extent that you're removing yourself, that you're taka willing to remove yourself. You're saying, I'll die if I need to for this cause. The cause is bigger than me. So you'll actually disappear, right? Because something bigger than you, the cause, will take your place entirely. Your life is on the line itself. It's called Mesiris Nefesh. Ubefrat keshem Mesiris Nefesh, hi al inyanim ke'elu sha'al pidin. It's an interesting point, particularly when this is a type of Mesiris Nefesh which according to the law, right? Sivoy delamayla, which again, what is the law? The law is a command from above. You're not obligated to die for them, right? There was a whole kind of debate that took place between the Rogachover, which we talk about a lot, right? He was the Gaon from Rogachov, and he was like one in 100 generations. The Rebbe got smicha from him, and the Rebbe brings his teachings and his shita in so many different places. He was actually the one that coined the term on the Frierdiker Rebbe, Nasi Hador. This notion that we all talk about the Rebbe as the prince of the generation, the Nasi Hador, the Rogachover said about the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he was basically, the Frierdiker Rebbe was saying that they should stay in Russia and not seek ways to basically escape, even though their lives were on the line and their religion was prohibited in every way, and it was the most dangerous thing that we've seen in generations. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was saying we should stay there. And when they asked the Rogachover, he said, no, the din says when you should go and practice Judaism in whatever place you can find where it's going to be, you're going to be free to practice. It's not. So they said, but the Rebbe said we should stay. He said, well, if the Rebbe said you should stay, who are you going to? What am I going to say? In other words, he's like the Sar HaTorah. I don't understand it. It's like beyond logic and beyond comprehension, even of the Torah's comprehension. But he's onto something there. Do what he says, right? So the idea is, what is that all about? That's a strange story. It's that the idea that the Frierdiker Rebbe was having Mesiris Nefesh for things that the Torah does not require you to have Mesiris Nefesh for. For example, what was he on about when he was standing on the back of that train? If you go read that Sicha, it's kind of crazy what he's talking about there. What was his point? That we cannot bow, we cannot bend, we have to make sure that our mission is complete. Was he talking about mikvah? Was he talking about bris, Shabbos? No. He was talking about we can't change the way that they want to corrupt the teaching of our Aleph base to our children, that they want to teach it Aleph, base, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, and that's not how we do it. We say, Kametz Aleph, Kametz base, Ba. This is what he was talking about. I'm not joking. Go read the Sicha. He was explaining.
They wanted to make a song
They wanted to change the way that we teach the structure of our language to our children. You could teach them Hebrew, but you have to teach them like this, right? He said, we'll die before we teach them like that. On a minhag bichlal is not shaykh to anything. Where is this mysterious nefesh? This is what you decide to speak about, like in your speech to the standing up to power at the most awesome time in history. It's a wild thing, but it goes on a type of mysterious nefesh, because if you're having mysterious nefesh for a thing that you're commanded for, it goes into the problem that we said before. A command, albeit it's God's command, it's pretty good. It's still a gila milamayla, right? It's still something which is being put upon you from above. For you to say, like, I am so submitted to this thing that I'm going to do things that are beyond what you're even asking me for. Like, I've internalized the details of this matter to the point that I'm entirely yours. If kametz aleph is important to you, it's important to me. And even though it's only important to you on the level of minhag, I'll give my life for this minhag. Because there's nothing other than me, than the Torah and all of its beautiful ways.
What if you give your life to that minhag and you don't get anywhere?
Well, we got here. We wouldn't be, I'm serious, the Rebbe said many times that this freedom of the Frierdiker Rebbe and his stand against this communist Russia is the reason why there's no communism today in Russia, and it's the reason why there's no huge part of the Jewish world which is right now behind change. You have to understand, the Rebbe, through his entire Nesias, from 1950 until when did the Iron Wall fall? 89. There was never a Farbrengen, basically. He didn't stop and say that we're sitting here Farbrengen like everything's normal. Our precious brothers and sisters are mamish in chains right now, and they're suffering in captivity, just like we're saying right now about our brothers in captivity. They were mamish in captivity. They were being killed on a daily basis for being Jewish. And he was kept telling us that this is going to end. In fact, he prophesied this against the greatest political advisors in the world. No one thought this was going to happen. And here this little man in Brooklyn was telling everybody, pack your bags. He was telling the authorities in Israel, build housing. You have no idea. There's going to be a huge number of Jews from Russia coming here. They didn't believe it. They cut their pants down when they came because they didn't listen to the Rebbe. He told them that this was going to take place. Because he knew, because when the Frierdiker Rebbe was already freed, it broke the whole klippah, and it was just a matter of unrolling it till we came out. So you say, what did it do? It did. And even though he was the Frierdiker Rebbe, etc., when you do it, it does. It makes a dira b'tachtomin. If you are allowing a place for Hashem in this world, that's the whole point. You don't have to worry about the results, because there's not you anymore. You put God into the situation, even if your life is taken, the cause is strengthened, right? And it works. It's what you're intended to do.
So was the Frierdiker Rebbe essentially equating what the communists were trying to do to what the Hashemans were trying to during the time of Hanukkah, where it was an attack spiritually rather than like on the physical side, where essentially every mitzvah needed to be fought for, needed to be.
Yes. It's called a shmad, when there's like a general, but even that, I guess you could. But the problem I didn't bring that up myself is because that would almost put the Frierdiker Rebbe into a situation where he was obligated in that type of mysterious nefesh. But the Rebbe is trying to point out here that he was doing things that the halacha did not require him to do.
So what the communists trying to do both, they were trying to physical and a spiritual. Correct?
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean it was a bit complicated because they officially you were allowed to be Jewish. And you were, but they put all these kind of strange blockages on the amount of people you could gather with, and really their whole interest was to be tyrannous and undo the entire Jewish religion. Just they did it whatever way they tried to pull that off. You have a question?
Yeah, what was your name? Pinchas. Pinchas's question. Maybe I can, because I also was wondering about it. Maybe I could say it again, like a different way, which is like. Let's say you're walking home from learning Torah, and you meet some drunk guy in the alley, and he says, bow down to this idol or I'm going to kill you. And you're alone in this place, and you say, I'm not going to bow down. I'd rather lose my life. He says,
right.
Great, and he kills you.
Yeah.
And you die there, and no one ever knows about it.
Yeah.
Whatever. So I think that the question is like...
What does it do for you?
The question is, I could have done like 1,000,000 mitzvahs and had 1,000,000 children, and like instead I'm supposed to die into this...
I'll just tell you a simple story. You're in Tzfat, so we have to tell stories of Tzfat. I'm sure you heard Beit Yosef. He wrote the Shulchan Aruch. It's buried here in Tzfat. So it says that he basically was given a certain he did something in his life, which we don't exactly know what it was, which merited him to have the greatest reward that the Torah has in store. And he was basically going to be able to die on Mesiras Nefesh. That was the greatest reward the Torah has in store. And what happened? He messed it up. I don't know what he did. He did this, he did that. He lost his a darga on his zchut level. And so in exchange, he went down a level. He was given the zchus of writing the Shulchan Aruch, upon which every single Jew would paskin from for the rest of his days on earth. That's the second place, so to speak, in your reward to God for your service here. What do you want? You want to do another mitzvah for who? What are you interested in over here? You think like your tefillin are going to get cold? Someone else puts them on? Someone else will put them on if you're not here. The point is, you're serving God. You want to live another day so you can serve God another day. If the call of the hour is to serve God in this unbelievably high state of affairs, which would end your service and complete your mission here, but it's what you're intended to do, guess what? If you're truly a servant, it doesn't matter what's going to happen with your next day or your memory, for that matter. We're not here for more things that you want to write books and you want people to remember you. God sent you here to serve Him, right? It's His business. If all of a sudden He calls for Mesiras Nefesh, and in this case, He didn't even call for Mesiras Nefesh. You're just like a pure, humble soldier serving God. There's something so pure and perfect about that that kind of defies our interest and our understanding of what your life is really all about.
I get it. Would you say that another level is like it's kind of like a lack of faith in Hashem when you say, well, Hashem would take my life for this thing that is seemingly so insignificant. If you really trust Hashem, then you know that however you're gonna go out or whatever, if he puts you in a situation where you have to give your life for this thing, then that's what he wanted.
Exactly.
That's the highest.
Another story. First of all, don't worry about your legacy or your existence. The story. It says, no, I'm serious. It's not a crazy thing to say. It's what motivates us. But there's another story which we've told not too long ago, but it fits here. When they were interrogating the Rebbe, when he was dragged in and they put him from place to place, and all of a sudden they wanted information. He was the Rebbe, he had all the information, right? So they put a revolver, he wouldn't talk. You know the story. They put a revolver on the table and they said, listen, you don't want to talk? We have a way of making people talk around here. So he said, that little toy, he says, that works for people who have many gods in one world. But I believe in one God and many worlds. And therefore, it's not going to be effective against me. Wow. Just like that, boom. In other words, he's not worried about his continuity even. Because you take me from here, you put me over here, I'm just here to serve. You know what I'm saying? You don't want me in the Air Force, I'll be in the Marines. Whatever it is. It's like these are not your concerns. Yes, it's a lack of faith in the one God to think that if you're going to do His will, something is going to happen to you that's not good.
Wow, what a great line.
Yeah, he's a serious player, man. This
Rabbi Akiva would died the Shema. It's like he had the ultimate.
Not only that, it says, Kol Yamai, all of his days, right? He was saying, when am I going to be able to die for Hashem? All he wanted to do was die for Hashem the whole day long. Okay, let's continue our meditations here.
I remember that line for when I'm living in Gush Etzion.
Okay.
In Gush Katif, you mean?
Anyway, so we're getting back to the plot. I think we're getting back to the plot. We're getting back to the plot. All right, so now taking this conversation of the fear of a slave deeper into this notion of Mesiras Nefesh, where we said that this is the ultimate bittul, of course, and especially when your Mesiras Nefesh is on things that are not commanded, like Kametz Aleph Ah, right? The Ein Mechoyev Limsor Nafsho Lam. You're not obligated, as it were, according to the Shulchan Aruch, to give your life for them, but you're a slave. You don't have an other existence besides Hashem. L'chein hi beikar lo aydei gilu or milamayla el aydei sha'adam moser es nafsho. And therefore, again, this is essentially something that has real Mesiras Nefesh is specifically for things that you're not commanded yourself to die for. Because if they were, and that's why I sort of wanted to avoid this notion of the shmad, of time of general decree, where you are obligated to have Mesiras Nefesh on smaller things. We're trying to make the point that if there's a command upon you telling you to have Mesiras Nefesh, then it's coming from above. And it's not the ultimate state of true bittul. Right? Because that again, what Hashem wants is a treasure house of fear of God. Only you can give that to him. He cannot make you do that, or he doesn't get the prize. It has to come from the Adam who's giving his soul. Now we can understand even deeper why the request and the prayer of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Baal HaGeula, in the Sikh of Gimel Tammuz, we're going back and just solidifying our understanding. Why is it all about he should be with us, the ketchup with the fries, right? Why is the interest of this verse pointing to us as the main thing, that Hashem should be with us because we are the primary player? Because what was he talking about on that fateful day when he said these words? He was talking about the avodah of Mesiras Nefesh, and therefore he grabbed the pasuk which identified, so to speak, our primacy before Hashem in a particular area when it comes to Yirat Shamayim and Mesiras Nefesh. Because if it's Mesiras Nefesh that comes from above, it's not the ultimate Mesiras Nefesh. And therefore, in his moment of the greatest Mesiras Nefesh ever, for things that were not even commanded of Mesiras Nefesh for, he found the perfect pasuk. He is the Rebbe, after all. Ubezeh atzmo ubekam v'kam inyanim she'al pi din ein mechoyev limsur nafshu aleihem, right? Because he was speaking about Mesiras Nefesh, and in this Inyan, he was having Mesiras Nefesh on many things he wasn't obligated in, right? All of that comes be'ikr me'adam atzmo. It has to be generated by you. There's no outside governing force. Otherwise, it's not real service. V'kevan she'avodah de Mesiras Nefesh ha'ikr hu ba'adam avodas ha'adam. And since when it comes to Mesiras Nefesh, the main thing is the man who's doing the service, his participation. And if there's going to be any type of revelation from above, in other words, what would be the revelation from above here? That they took him into a high maximum security prison and scared him and put rats in around him and threatened his life over and over again. That's a revelation from above, right? In other words, but that's only there. That's not the cause of his Mesiras Nefesh, in other words. That's only there to, so to speak, like put him in a position where he can choose to have Mesiras Nefesh. That's the point. That the main thing in that scenario is the decision of the Rebbe, is the avodah from below to above. All the godliness that's involved in that is only there to aid and help him in his own decision from below. And that's why he began this whole conversation with this request of let Hashem be with us. Because we're talking about doing this. And yeah, we could use a little help here, but we're going to take this on whether you help us or not. This is the idea. And this is the pasuk. So we're going to we have a couple minutes. 5 minutes. We have 5 minutes? Yeah. All right, let's go on to Daled. We're now going to sort of confuse ourselves a little bit. We just got through saying that im, right, goes on something which is ikr and tafel, which means there's a main thing and there's a less main thing. However, even though one is the primary and one is the secondary, still the word im only comes when there's a comparison to the two things, right? Like the example that we gave inside, let's keep away from ketchup. You're making me lahavdil. The idea of the we spoke about the inheritance of the father versus the inheritance of the husband from this woman, and in other words, one is primary, one is secondary, but they're obviously compared to each other. They're talking about the same matter. There's a similarity between them. So when you use im, it now implies two things: main and secondary, but also comparative. Kedarsh's Rizal, as the sages said. And this is just in last week's parsha. V'isyatzvu sham imcha, right? Imcha b'domilacha. That it says they shall stand there with you. Just remember what this is referring to? This is referring to the gathering of the 70 elders to come and have the spirit of Moshe be ma'atzil aleihem, they got atzilust from Moshe, and it says that Hashem brought them into the tent, and they should stand there with you. And the idea is, imcha b'domin l'cha. Suddenly they're going to be with you, because before they were just regular people, and now they're going to be with you. Okay, they're secondary to you, but the concept is that they're also compared to you, right? The hagam shaloshin im mora al davar tafel. Even though we said im means secondary makom yesh lo dimyun la'ikar, but it also has this connotation of a comparison to the main thing. It's not a type of secondary which is totally incomparable. Val derech zeh hu b'lashon es. Okay, he's going into a little dikduk over here. We have a similar concept in Hebrew with the word es. Shemura al davar tafel kadosh rizal. Also, es refers to a secondary thing. When you have the word es in front of something, usually people would read es. It's just sort of a grammatical placeholder. It doesn't have meaning, but obviously it's a pretty important Torah, specifically since it has the from Aleph ad Taf, right? It contains like all the letters of the Hebrew language, but it's there's no just letters in the Torah that are simply there for grammar, right? It has a meaning, and oftentimes we use it as a way of learning things out of the Torah, and we learn things out of the Torah that are in a way of tafel, secondary from this word es. And he gives an example, right? There's a pasuk that says es besaro, where it's talking about over there a case where they're discussing whether the word lo seachel, you cannot eat, in the Torah, refers to that something, when it says you cannot eat it, it also means you cannot have benefit from it. You can't have hana. There's a long discussion over there in Psachim, whether or not when it says these words, it means simply eating, or also it means you can't have benefit either. And they get to this idea where it says, lo yechel es besaro, right, when it's talking about do we have still patience to listen to this? It's the last point. We have, there's a concept where it says, you know what a shor haniskal is? An animal which kills a person, chas v'shalom. He has the din that you're supposed to kill the animal, right? Stone him? You stone him. The idea, the animal gets killed, but even before the animal gets killed, even if you shecht him, you can't eat him, and it's usher to eat, and it's usher also bahana. Done, right? So the idea, it says lo ye'echel es besaro, don't eat its flesh, right? But it says es, it. And then it says Baal Hashor Naki. Another pasuk comes along and says the owner of the ox is clean, which simply means he's clean. In other words, that he does not get punished for his ox killing someone, but they learned it out. He's clean of all his possessions. In other words, the owner of the ox is cleaned out, which means you can't have any benefit from this. So then we ask a question. If already the word you cannot eat it, lo se'achel, already means you can't eat it and you can't have benefit, why do I need another pasuk to tell me he's clean from all of his assets, he has no benefit? You already told me that from the word itself. You following? So then they said, because es besaro, the word es means his skin, something which is tuffle to basar. So you might think I can't eat or have benefit from his skin, from his flesh. But es besaro, but from his skin I might be able to have benefit. So there's another pasuk. It says, no, he's clean. You wiped him out. You can't have anything. What do we hear from here? You guys can go back and watch that if you want to understand the drasha better. We don't have time to repeat it. But what do we hear from here? That the es is referring to something which is tuffle to the thing that it's es to. Es besaro means the skin, the skins of this flesh. So we see that just like im, it has there's a main and a secondary. So to es, there's a main and a secondary. Just let me make one more point. Mikom makom hu bedom ilaiker. But nonetheless, also in es, the two things have to be compared. The skin is like the flesh. In other words, you wouldn't just have a comparison of two completely incomparable things. It's trying to tell you main, secondary, but there's a comparison between them. We're not going to have time to go on. Okay, we'll catch up with this tomorrow.